Alright, here we are again. But I'll preface this with a format update and with an update to the points values. I get the feeling that something might have changed, but henceforth, executively, I've decided that the hot takes portion doesn't seem to be doing much to the overall entertainment / edutainment of the segment, so that's just going to be dropped in favor of focusing on the reviewing of the deck and whatnot. Let's see. And we'll be also seeing if the decks that have been deemed a bust are still a bust. So let's see. I think it's gone down some, but still a no. Where's Triumph? Definitely still a no. And Spellcast, Rise of the Dragon Lords was last week. Spellcaster's Judgment. Still a no, and I haven't even finished it. I just stopped. But, yeah. Things have changed, but still a no. Alright. So, the decks that have been considered a bust are still a bust. I don't think there's been much of a change, has there? Well, in any case, we're now on to the Dark Emperor. So this one... Let's see... Okay. So I assumed that this one, I misremembered that this one focused on the monarchs themselves, but honestly, it actually focuses on one in particular and bases a strategy around it. But people were crazy about this monarch, and because this one has a very nasty effect. Let's see. So how about we get right into it and we'll explain. So this one is an interesting quote-unquote ace, because while most of the aces of the structured decks were level 8s or 7s, this one is a level 6 monster with 2400 attack. Now, why would this be? Well, let me tell you. This particular monster is part of the Monarch series, which started out as a mid-tier level. Like, they have certain effects that activate when you tribute summon them. All of them were okay, but this one, when this card is tribute summoned, you target a card on the field and it's banished. And if it is a dark monster, if it happens to be a dark monster, your opponent would then take 1,000 extra damage. So I imagine that the deck's strategy would be probably focused on getting this guy either back into the hand to tribute summon once more, or facilitating different ways to tribute summon this monster. And I'm wondering if that one field spell will make an appearance here, because back then, using its effect, it still constituted as a tribute summon, if I remember correctly. But now they've errated it to make it to where it's just a normal summon instead of a tribute summon. So, and as is the fashion, the ace monster is only one of as it comes in box. So, Caius. Dimensional Alchemist, level 4. 1300 attack, 200 defense. underwhelming stats, but let's check its effect. This might be where it comes in clutch. Once per turn, you can activate this effect to remove from play the top card of your deck and give this card 500 attack until the end phase. So that would make it a potential 1800 attack. Decent, little under the highest that you would want it to be, but serviceable for the time. And it would likely lend to many strategies that this deck might hold. Furthermore, when this card is destroyed and sent from your side of the field to the graveyard, you can select one of your removed from play monsters and return it to the hand. Destroyed and sent from your side of the field to the graveyard. So yes, this is... I would say this would be for the deck a recruiter, if anything. Because not only does it facilitate what I assume is going to be the base strategy of getting monsters from the deck into out of play, it would also have a way of getting monsters that you would want in your hand from removed from play. So yeah, Dimensional Alchemist is a very apt name for this deck. And it would probably be powerful for the strategy that this deck employs. Alright, Samsara Kaiser. I don't remember this one being that much. When you tribute summon a monster by tributing this card, return this card to your hand. So I understand what Konami was trying to go for when they made this card. The problem is, this monster is far too weak, far too squishy, and tribute summoning is far too slow for this to be very viable. Like, what they were going for was, even though you tribute this card, you'd be able to maintain hand advantage. But there are too many ways for players to get rid of Samsara Kaiser before you even get the tribute summon. And even if you're able to use a card like double summon, it would require too much, what is the word I'm trying to use? Too much investment for it to be worth it. So Samsara Kaiser is definitely a weaker addition to this deck. I would probably prefer something that would utilize being banished or something like that. Oh yeah, and I believe by the time that at the time that this deck was released, banishment was called removed from play. Samsara Kaiser. I recall Samsara being like a mini archetype, but not a full archetype. Samsara. I'll have to look into that. But Samsara Kaiser. Now that I think on it though, Samsara Kaiser would potentially work pretty well in a Yubel deck. Because, like, as I recall, Samsara was a side archetype to Yubel as a start. And if you have Samsara Kaiser in the hand while Yubel is on the field, then yes, Samsara Kaiser would have good use then, because Yubel requires you to tribute a monster every turn or it gets destroyed. But in this deck, Samsara Kaiser doesn't really have much use. Now I'm noticing two interesting additions to this deck that could potentially be pretty powerful, but let's investigate, shall we? Let's start with Golden Homunculus. The two cards I'm looking at have effects that are based on banished cards. Let's see, level 6, put simply, it gains 300 attack and defense for each of your banished cards. So, like, with one card, it would be an 1800 beat stick. The only reason I'd say it's not that bad is because it doesn't require that much of a cost. And it has good potential to be a massive beat stick. But, as I keep saying again and again, it doesn't have any self-protection, and therefore it is absolutely squishy, which diminishes its value greatly. But I would say it's a good filler for Caius. You see, and then there's Helios. Let's see what you do. Okay, so it's also a beat stick, but far weaker. It's like the attack and defense of this monster is each equal to the number of removed from play monsters times 100. Terrible. Because for it to be at the very least viable as a level 4, you would have to have half of your deck banished. That requires way too much investment for this monster. So, yes, this would definitely be seeing the cutting block very quickly. Let's see. And we'll be seeing a few of these. Different Dimension Warrior. Oops. I assume that's what DD stands for. Could mean Dark Dimension, but I say Different Dimension. After damage calculation, when this card battles a monster, banish that monster. Also banish this card. This very, very useful alongside DD Warrior Lady, because it is a sort of 1-for-1 card, but if you have like this was especially useful back in the day when there wasn't much in the way of monster protection outside of bringing monsters back, and the banishment zone, or as it was called at the time, removed from play, there wasn't a lot of ways to get it back from there. So this was a very effective way of removing monsters from the field. Though its value has truly diminished through power creep over time, as now there are 1 or 2 easy ways of bringing monsters back from the banishment zone. And also, so much can happen before this monster even battles a monster. Plus, it would also leave you down a monster, and these days, end fields have at least 3. So, yes, it's a diminished return. Doesn't see a lot of play, but I can see potential if someone wants to make it work. I see the potential of it. And you know what? I think I'll go through all of the DD monsters right here and now. Because yes, there are quite a few of them. So we did DD Warrior. Let's go to DD Warrior Lady that I had mentioned in passing just then. So let's go into detail with her. I believe her effect is very similar but worded differently. Oh, nope. It's actually very similar. So it allows this. Oh yeah, let me double check something though. DD word, yeah, just one copy. So yeah, very distinct because it also has the exact same effect, but is a distinct card. So you would essentially have 6 of the same card. However, her stats are far better. You know, middling attack and defense, very decent. So she can survive more battles with some boosts. So yeah, this is a much better choice, I think. Alrighty. DD Scout Plane. This one is a strategy enabler, last I checked. Yes. Once per turn during the end phase, if this card is currently banished and was banished this turn, special summon it in face-up attack position. So yeah, this one has a lot of potential because, if you recall, Dimensional Alchemist banishes cards from the top of the deck. So let's say you happen to have had DD Scout Plane on the top of the deck. It would have banished it, and at the end of the turn, it'll be summoned, and now you've got 2 monsters on the field ready to go. But again, you've got more bodies, but this is during the end phase, which means the opponent has a chance to get rid of them, and field wipes are very common. But I also see potential in DD Scout Plane. Let's see. Scout Plane. Let's see. DD Survivor. And there's 2 of this guy. Let's see. Yes, this is another one that comes back when banished. During the end phase, if banished while face up on your side of the field this turn, special summon this banished card. It can only be activated once per turn. So this one doesn't nearly mesh as well as the other, but it's more powerful, so that's the balance out. And I am certain that there are methods of banishing from the field. In fact, if a certain card is in here, I'm certain that this would actually have a good place in the deck. Because if it's banished during your opponent's turn, it'll be back. You'll have something to tribute for Caius or what have you. So a very good card to have in the deck, and you've got 2 of them. So yeah, this is definitely a important part of the strategy. And we've reached the quarter mark, but let's finish talking about the DD monsters. There's only 2 more, and then we'll go into the first quarter review. Let's see here. DDM, Different Dimension Master. This one makes me think that yes, DD does represent different dimension. Level 5, 1700 attack, 1500 defense. Underwhelming stats. Let's see. But it lets you special summon your banished monsters. So, tribute summon this. You're able to summon something that you've got banished already for essentially 1 tribute summon. So, serviceable for this deck. I'd say this is this has potential. Then the final DD monster, DD Assailant. Oops. Let's see, level 4 monster, 1700 attack, 1600 defense. Subpar stats. After damage calculation, when this card is destroyed by battle with an opponent's monster, banish that monster, also banish this card. So yes. A similar effect, but less chance of missing the timing. Because it occurs after this card is destroyed by battle. Whereas I assume the other two that we've gone over have a chance of missing their activation effects should something happen. Plus, this one doesn't automatically banish. So you can have it on the field for longer. So yeah, a distinction with very little difference, but an important distinction at that. Assailant, assailant. Okay, now we're going into the quarter review. So, right off the bat, we're already seeing what the strategy is, but we're not seeing too many ways of utilization, but as always, this will become more fleshed out as we go into the spells, so we just got to get through the monsters first. Let's see. So, going through the rest of the monsters, we have, I believe, a famous monster, Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. Let's see. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target up to 2 monsters in the graveyard, banish those targets. Your opponent cannot banish cards from either graveyard. So, yes. Not only does this have an offensive application to banishing cards, it also prevents your opponent from doing the same. And it is a somewhat decent stat for Kaiku, but it was fine back when special summoning wasn't as prevalent. But now there are, I believe, at least one card that has it the same soft effect that has better stats or better staying power. So, a decent card, but there are better cards out there. Bazoo the Soul Eater. I believe this one is in a similar vein as the Alchemist. Let's see. Once per turn, you can banish up to 3 monsters from the graveyard. This card gains 300 attack for each until the end of your opponent's turn. So, a fully charged Bazoo would have 2,500 attack, which is amazing for a level 4 monster. And it is a facilitator of the strategy, so a very powerful one at that. So it doesn't matter that the graveyard isn't a very reliable source of renewable cost for this effect, or that it'll be easily taken out by a spell, because the point of it is that you can banish monsters, and this deck would likely have ways of getting those back more easily, or would prefer those monsters to be banished to make other monsters more powerful. The fact that it gains attack on top of that is just icing on the cake. So, yes, this is definitely an important card alongside the Alchemist in order to get things rolling. And it's a good thing there are 2 of them. The Exiled Force. I believe this is just tribute this card to target a monster in the field and destroy that target. So yeah, this one was in a earlier deck. It's a 1-for-1. Isn't as powerful as before, but if certain cards are in this deck, this could see some potential. Because it says it tributes, so if it would be sent to the graveyard, it would be banished instead if certain spells or traps in this deck. We'll soon see. But for now, Exiled Force is in this deck. I wonder if they will retrain that card to make it a bit more powerful, like make it to where it doesn't target at least. Then it would have some potential. Alright, Chaos Rider Gustav. This one I didn't really think much of, but let's have a look again. Let's see. Underwhelming stats. Once per turn, you can remove from play up to 2 spell cards from the graveyard. This card gains 300 attack for each card removed until the end of your opponent's next turn. So yeah. Everything that I've said about Bazoo the Soul Eater, the same applies to Chaos Rider Gustav, except it's spell cards instead. Could be a little bit harder, but also has just as much potential. And of course, this one has to be in there. Grand Maju Da'eza. A level 3 monster whose attack and defense becomes the number of your banished cards times 400. Similar to the Helios card from earlier, but instead of 100, it gains 400. So it requires less buildup. Like as an example, like if you have 10 banished cards, which is a quarter of your deck, that would mean you would have a 4,000 attack monster on the field. So yes, a very potentially powerful beat stick. It does have a lot of caveats, but if you can easily get it to 4,000, I don't see that much problem with it being squishy. Banisher of the Radiance. Okay, so this is one of those facilitators. There are more powerful ones, but this is a start. While this guy is on the field, any card that would be sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So we've already seen a few examples of cards that would take advantage of this. So, I don't think much more needs to be said. Come on, there we go. Right. And that is all the monsters. I can see this balance being okay. Like only slightly more spells. There might not be as many monsters on the field, but I believe that 1 or 2 at least of the spell cards and trap cards are ways of getting monsters back to the field, so it can be forgiven for having less monsters than total spells and traps. In fact, let's have a look at another DD card that is an equip spell that is very similar to Shallow Grave. Or no, Premature Burial. I'm thinking of Premature Burial. And it even has a similar artwork. We have Different Dimension Reincarnation. Discard a card, then target one of your banished monsters, special summon it in attack position and equip it with this card. When this card leaves the field, destroy the equipped monster. Simple. This is also unlimited as I said, there aren't a lot of ways to bring back monsters from the banished zone. And this card, let's see. Yeah, this card is seen as an alternative way of not having Monster Reborn, which for the longest time was banned, but is currently limited and should probably stay limited. And this is a very powerful card to have for this deck. There are going to be a lot of banished monsters, some of them you don't want in there, and this would be a good way to get them back on the field. Yeah, I don't think much more needs to be said that doesn't repeat myself. And with that, that puts us at the halfway point. So we're seeing some dotting of ways of facilitating the strategy. Nothing strong yet, but again, it's still keeping to the theme of banishing monsters in order to get more powerful returns. So, continuing on the spells, how about we go over the ones that we've already been over? Let's see, going from the bottom, we have Brain Control, which has been errated. Let's see, but is still pretty powerful. We have Lightning Vortex. Discard a card to destroy all face-up monsters on your opponent's side of the field. We have Enemy Controller. Either change a monster's battle position or tribute a monster to gain control of a monster for a turn. Big Bang Shot, which is an attack boost plus piercing damage with the risk of getting your monster banished, but it's not that big of a risk for this deck. Let's see, Nobleman of Crossout for getting rid of those pesky flip effect monsters. It will banish any and all flip effect monsters with the same name, or it will just banish a face down monster. And then Mystical Space Typhoon for your average spell removal. So let's get all that in. Surprisingly, no points allocated yet, but I think that will change shortly. Okay. Alright. Now then, immediately we have a spell that really helps to facilitate this deck strategy. Soul Release. It is a simple effect. Target up to 5 cards in the graveyard, either graveyards, and banish them. Simple enough. But it's very powerful in practice. You could banish cards in your opponent's graveyard to keep them from getting them back. You can banish cards from your graveyard to help get your monster's effects. Even spells and traps aren't safe from Soul Release. The only way to make this more powerful is to make it a quick play spell. That way, you could chain it to an opponent's monster effect that targets something in the graveyard. If you banish it, it fizzles out. It's a real shame then that Different Dimension Crow isn't in this deck. That would actually have more viability than Soul Release, honestly. But then again, Soul Release is still pretty powerful, it's just slow. Take that as you will. And now, Here's one that I'm honestly surprised to see in this structure deck. Reinforcement of the Army, which is still currently limited. In fact, I want to check something real quick. On fire. Good to see that Bonfire is also limited, and for good reason. So let's talk about the history of these two cards, starting with the oldest, Reinforcement of the Army. Put simply, this lets you put a level 4 or lower monster from your deck to your hand. That is a warrior monster. This, for the longest time, at one point it was banned, but has always been limited. For a short while it was semi-limited, but it has, for the longest time, been a limited card, because the more you're able to get cards from the deck to your hand, a specific card even, the more powerful it gets. And we faced a similar problem with the more recent edition of Bonfire. Bonfire allows for pyro monsters to now have the same help. So now, alongside the warrior type monsters, we're likely to see pyro monsters get the same treatment. And I can only hope that maybe 1 or 2 more types will see this treatment. I honestly think Konami is sitting on a gold mine with this. If you could make another card that helps a different type in this way, this would be a good thing to have. Furthermore, Reinforcement of the Army is far more powerful because Bonfire, you can only activate it once per turn. Not that you would be able to, but there are ways of making it possible if it didn't have the stipulation, which Reinforcement of the Army doesn't have. It doesn't have that limitation. There are ways of getting spell cards back to your hand from the grave. So yeah. And I can see a good amount of targets for Reinforcement of the Army. So yeah. Reinforcement of the Army, and look at that. The first card that allocates points. A big amount of them, and for good reason. In fact, I wonder if Bonfire has the same amount of points. Bonfire has fewer points, but I can see why, because you can only activate 1 Bonfire per turn. But it's still pretty up there as far as point values is, so I'm honestly not gonna get mad about 2 points. Let's see. Now then, Dark Core. This one is an offensive application. Another offensive application. Discard a card, target a face-up monster in the field, banish it. So this honestly gets past destruction prevention, but it targets. There are a good amount of monsters that prevent targeting, so this is powerful, but not unstoppable. Going towards the final quarter, we have 2 copies of Dimensional Fissure, which is another card that I mentioned would be needed to facilitate a lot of the strategies of this deck. A card that, while on the field, any monster sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Very powerful. Not much more needs to be said. This is a very good facilitator. It's probably why there are 2 of them in here. And it also messes with your opponent's strategy a bit, because they'll, as a general way, they'll generally not have a lot of cards to deal with getting their monsters banished. So yes, this is powerful for you, powerful for the opponent, but it can be easily dealt with. Alright. So, we finally... Let's see. So, after 3 quarters, we're finally starting to see facilitation of the strategy. We're seeing good ways of implementing monster removal, as well as ways of keeping it going. And, however, I am slightly perturbed by the fact that apparently there's going to be 9 traps in this deck. That's possibly too many traps, as they require a good amount of setup. A lot of times you'd want to get things going right away. And over time, traps have diminished in their value. So it would have to be a higher reward for the risk being implemented. But there are some powerful traps that I could see being in here. So let's see if we've got any that I've already gone over. There's Sakuretsu Armor. Monster that destroys the attacking monster. I believe I've gone over Torrential Tribute as well, which serves as a powerful summon stop. I feel like I've gone over Bottomless Trap Hole, but just in case. Bottomless Trap Hole is seen as an upgrade to the Trap Hole series. With Trap Hole, it requires that your opponent normal summons a monster with a certain amount of attack. This, if your opponent summons a monster in general, be it special summon or normal summon, with 1500 or more attack, destroy the monster with 1500 more attack, and if you do, banish it. Furthermore, it doesn't limit itself with one monster. If multiple monsters were summoned at the same time, this trap will take care of all of them, as long as they are 1500 more or more attack. So this was a pretty powerful thing to have in the deck back in the day, but now there are a lot of ways of getting rid of traps, or blowing the board completely. So it's diminished this thing's power. So yeah, not a lot that we've already covered, which I can see as a good thing, honestly. So, Sakuretsu Armor, Bottomless Trap Hole, and Torrential Tribute. By order of the Emperor. Ah yes, this I believe was likely meant to support the Monarchs. When a monster effect is activated, that activates when a monster is normal summoned. You can negate the activation, then the player whose effect activation was negated draws a card. So I see it as a support / floodgate against the Monarchs. Yeah, support and a cancel to the Monarch strategy. And if Monarchs ever become relevant again, I think I'll grab a few of these just to have for the event. Now here's a pretty powerful card for this deck. Return from the Different Dimension. A alternate and very powerful version of Call of the Haunted. To activate, you pay half your life points, then you summon as many of your removed from play monsters as possible. During the end phase, remove from play all monsters that were special summoned by this effect. A good way of getting back your removed from play monsters, and it also helps to facilitate some of the strategies that those monsters would potentially have, especially the different dimension monsters. So yes, a very good card for this deck. And another. And this is a high point value. 50 points. Youch. Then again, it does allow you to summon 5 monsters at once you get it set up. So, yeah, I can see why it is 50 points. It's getting us dangerously close to the limit, but we don't have that far to go. Did I miss something? Ah. There we go. So yeah. 3 more cards to go. I can't see them being too bad of a point, but we'll see. But all of them are pretty powerful for the strategy, and one of them just being powerful in general. Karma Cut. Discard a card, then target a face-up monster your opponent controls. Banish that target, then banish all cards with the same name as that monster from your opponent's graveyard. Very powerful. Its only drawback is it's a trap and that it targets. As I said before, targeting makes it weaker. There are too many ways of preventing being targeted. But this would potentially be the most powerful of trap cards of this type, being that you discard a card, then you will be able to get rid of something. This banishes a face-up monster your opponent controls, and then banishes cards with the same name from the graveyard. So yeah, I see this as a very powerful card in the format, possibly. Okay. Then we've got Different Dimension Dynamite. This one could have some points set to it, as it inflicts 300 damage to your opponent for each of their removed from play cards. This has a potential for high damage with some of the removal in the deck, but it's not quite focused on this, so the effect is very diminished. Unless you're focusing your deck on getting this card off, it's not going to have a lot of payoff. But it's still a decent addition to this deck as it is. We've got one more to go, so let's see how much further it will pull us. I can see a few points being allocated to this trap. This is Macrocosmos, which is in the same vein as Banisher of Radiance or Dimensional Fissure. Let's see, while this card is face up in the field, any card set at the graveyard is banished instead. However, I'm now seeing why Helios the Primordial Sun was in the deck. This, when activated, special summons Helios the Primordial Sun from the hand or the deck. So, yeah, I see now why Helios the Primordial Sun is in the deck. I still think this card would be just as well without Helios, unless you want the tribute fodder. So yeah, with Helios, without Helios, there are other cards you could probably cut out instead. Maybe put in one more Helios. But let's see if Macrocosmos adds any points. And it doesn't. Okay. So, is the Dark Emperor structure deck Genesys ready? A resounding no. But only because of 1 or 2 cards in the deck. And honestly, you could cut different dimension dynamite for a different card and it would be good to go. Let's see here. In fact, getting rid of different dimension dynamite would probably give you some space for the lower point value hand traps, and this would be perhaps the different dimension crows even. Those would be a good addition for this deck. So yes, it's a bust, but it's salvageable. Because I don't see different dimension dynamite as being that much of a loss for this deck. So, yeah, it's very much salvageable. And as for the deck itself, it has a lot of ways of utilizing its strategy and implementing its strategy, but it doesn't have a strong end game. So I think the most you can hope to do with this is harry your opponent to keep them from getting theirs off while you do chip damage. That's the potential I see in this deck. So, thank you for joining me on this episode of Is This Structure Deck Genesys Ready? And it seems we are now moving into the 5Ds era next week with Zombie World. That one's going to be an interesting thing to look into. But until then, this is Controlled Chaos, signing out.